Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Jonathan Fadugba, and we've had a few weeks in Sweden, predominantly, haven't we, the last few weeks? And this week we're going to start straight away in Norway because a lot is happening. I'm joined as ever by the Norwegian expert, Steve Wyss, Mr. Meatman Soccer. How are you, sir?
Well, good day to you, Jonathan. I'm doing very well, thanks. And you're right. Suddenly, Norway has come alive at the top end of the table. It looks like it was a foregone conclusion, to be honest with you. I thought I could put my feet up for the last few weeks, but I've been springboarded back into action because results at the top of the table have obviously made it very close. And that's what we're here to discuss. But yeah, I hope you're doing well, Jonathan.
Never underestimate the power of Norwegian football. So jolt you out of your seat there, Steve, because I remember a few weeks back you were getting maybe a bit comfortable in that chair of yours, a bit complacent. Things are cruising along nicely, as you were saying. Nothing really to report. And out of nowhere, two huge results. As they say in the bingo trade, Steve, snakes alive 55. That is the golden number this week, because at the top of the table in Eliteserien, we've got Bodø Glimt on 55 points, plus 35 goal difference, 3 games to go, and exactly the same number of points, Steve. Brann, 55 points, two fives. Snakes alive, as they say. They are on plus 22 goal difference with 3 games to go. Some big weekend results, Steve. Of course, Molde Glimt is the big one. Brann ticking along with a 3-0 win at Odd. Let's get straight into this title race because it is starting to heat up, isn't it, my friend?
Yeah, both teams on 55 points now, and Brann have basically taken or eaten away 10 points on Glimt in the last 5 games, which is a hell of a lot. I mean, when the gap was 10 points, okay, I think there was a few games in hand floating around, maybe with some other teams as well, but roughly 10 points clear, certainly of Brann. You can see why I'm saying that it was probably looked like a foregone conclusion with 7 or 8 games left. But Brann have suddenly become faultless in this period. They've made the most of a good run of games, but they've been convincing. And Glimt have dropped points. And it all started with when the two teams met on the 22nd of September. Brann beat Bodø Glimt 4-1. And I think the general feeling, I certainly thought this, it just felt like a token win for Brann in terms of title race. It felt like a defeat which Glimt could afford. And it didn't really matter for them. And I think the very next game they played against Porto in the Europa League and beat Porto. So it was happy days again. It felt more important in terms of the race for second place, which of course brings a Champions League qualification spot this year. But it just shows you take your half the ball once and sort of get sloppy once, it can escalate. And since then, they've 0-0 away against Tromsø, their big local rivals. They lost in the 95th minute against Rosenborg. And then an absolutely wild, now that was a 3-2 loss to Rosenborg. And then a crazy 3-3 draw against Molde, which, that's going to be at the forefront of the discussion in this episode. So suddenly, they only now have the lead by goal difference. Fortunately for Bodø Glimt, they've got a 13 goal difference and there's only 3 games to go. So realistically, win their 3 games and it's still in their hands. I don't really see Brann clawing back 13 goals, do you, in 3 games? Although, never say never. Certainly not with the fixtures they've got anyway. So it's still in Bodø Glimt's hands, but the pressure is now well and truly on.
Yeah, and we spoke a few weeks back, and maybe it's our own fault, Steve, because we started talking about a Glimt legacy. We were even talking about an era of dominance, and now out of nowhere, they could well blow this title race. I mean, they've got 3 games to go. They've got Odd, Fredrikstad as well this weekend on the 10th, and then they have Lillestrøm at home on the final game week, which is on the 1st of December. Steve, in between that period of time, they've got a trip to Old Trafford, playing Manchester United, 28th of November in the Europa League. Since we spoke about them in that podcast where we asked about the dynasty 2-3 episodes ago, they've only won 1 of their last 6 games. Now, I'm aware that a few of those have been in Europe, Steve, but what's been the cause of this sort of stuttering period for Glimt? Is it just a case of too many games? Is they taking an eye off it? I mean, the high-scoring game against Molde, tell us about that. Where was that sort of won and lost? Because that was a helter-skelter game.
Well, the 0-0 away against Tromsø, I think that was nothing wrong with that result. I think it was on the back of an international break. The problem was that obviously Brann went to Rosenborg that same weekend and won 2-1, which was maybe a little bit of a surprise. I think Rosenborg have been playing a lot better this year, and it would have been seen as a spot. Maybe Brann would drop points there. But then the defeat against Rosenborg at home, 3-2. Rosenborg led 1-0 half-time. Sorry, not half-time. They led 1-0 and Glimt turned it around to lead 2-1. So you're thinking they're right back on track. But then immediately Rosenborg levelled. It was 2-2 for a long time, and then Rosenborg won in the 92nd minute. What I've seen in the last two games, and also in the Karabag match this evening in the Europa League, is Glimt games have become too basketball-like again. They don't have any control. They don't have enough control on the games. They're very end-to-end. They're giving up far too much space, and they are giving the opponents too many big chances. And Glimt, of course, are creating plenty of opportunities themselves. That's not a problem. And they probably should have scored more goals than they have done in the last 3 games. But I don't like it. Just doesn't feels too frantic to me. Whereas I think the best version of Glimt in this dynasty period, or this great run in the last 4 or 5 years, has been when they've just sucked the life out of opponents in terms of restricted them to nothing. This high energy sort of system. Players seem out of position. I don't know whether some are not tracking back as well as they want. There seems to be a bit of panic in the air. And the title may well have been decided in that game against Molde, because Molde led 2-0 in that game. 2-0 to Molde. Bodø Glimt pulled one back, and then Molde had a penalty right on half-time. Missed that penalty. That would have made it 3-1. Now, eventually, again, Bodø Glimt retook the lead. They actually led this game 3-2, just like they did against Rosenborg, and then conceded another equaliser. This time they held on for the draw. I think even they were a little bit more perhaps passive towards the end and realising a draw is not terrible, but they could have easily been a winner at either end. And they've just lost control on fixtures. That's the problem suddenly. And I think it would have been all right normally. Normally teams have been letting them off the hook in the last couple of years, but Brann have won 5 straight games. So they've been relentless. And, for the first time, a team has really managed to make them pay for perhaps their mistakes. But it's, like I say, it's still in Glimt's hands.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with the game against Molde, you mentioned their basketball match. I mean, if you look at the goals, 2 goals from Brynhildsen. For Molde, the second goal, Steve, he is miles clear. I mean, that is definitely sort of an Erik ten Hag counter-attack there that they've given up. Glimt very open at the back, one ball over the top, and he's completely clean through, and he buries it well. They have managed to get back into the game, but do you think that is there a sense of nervousness in the camp, especially with big European matches coming up? Is there a chance they get distracted by the trip to Old Trafford, for example? Or how do you think the management team are going to approach this coming, few games? This evening, just as we mentioned, they've had a game against Karabag. How do you think the mood's going to be, and how do you think they're going to split the focus between some very big European matches against trying to focus on getting this title wrapped up?
I think they've maybe got a bit ahead of themselves. I think they had a bit of a downer in the late summer for not qualifying for the Champions League. And then they beat Porto 3-2, and all the plaudits came Glimt's way. I mean, everywhere across Europe, we saw the clips and stuff. Bodø Glimt had beaten Porto 3-2. It was big news. Kjetil Knutsen's the hottest manager back on the block again. All the players getting lauded. And I think really they just could do without this distraction of the title race. They just kind of want to get it won. And I think ideally they would just want to focus entirely on Europe. And, they've got the trip to Old Trafford to look forward to. They'd love to have sealed the title entirely by then. So I think it's been an annoyance, and I think they've gone a bit sloppy. I think they've kind of presumed a few wins along the way. The Karabag match, I think, felt quite presumptuous going into it tonight. I think they thought it should be quite an easy win for them against a Karabag side who were bottom of the table. Maybe they went to Tromsø and thought we'll easily beat them. That was a 0-0. And I think they probably approached the games against Rosenborg thinking, we'll easily outscore you. So I think they got a bit ahead of themselves. I think that's they've looked at their fixture list. It's still a favourable fixture list, by the way. Like, there's no reason why they shouldn't win their final 3 games. I just don't think they would have believed they'd be in this position, though. Possibly because they wouldn't have believed that Brann would stay consistent. Brann normally have a clanger in them somewhere. Maybe it will come soon. So it's just funny. It's strange how it's just escalated from nowhere. It looked done. And by the way, Viking are only 5 points behind. So I think they're probably out of it, but it's interesting how they've dropped so many points.
Yeah, big task ahead for Glimt and some massive games to come as well. They'll be facing Ruben Amorim in a few weeks' time, so that should be an interesting clash between the two managers. On the other side of the coin here, Steve, as you've just mentioned there with Brann, we're only recently promoted back from the second division from Obos. We'll talk a little bit about Obos before the end of the show, but a amazing run so far, Steve. 7 straight wins, including that 4-1 win against Glimt back in September. They've gone to Rosenborg and won. They've battered Tromsø 4-0. Gone to Odd, Stephen won 3-0. Looked pretty comfortable. Some decent goals as well in that match. They've got players who are looking sort of in good form. Everything's going pretty well for them at the moment, isn't it, Steve? I mean, they're absolutely flying. And Hegebo, 2 goals at the weekend. He is on form, isn't he?
Yeah, I think probably the best thing that happened to them was getting knocked out of Europe. They should have really qualified for the Conference League. Got done by Astana in the second leg. And if they'd been in the conference, I think they would have probably dropped some points somewhere along the line. As it happens, it might work in their favour. I mean, the worst case now, surely they should be finishing second place, in my opinion, although their fixtures are a lot harder than Glimt's. I suppose we should mention the fixtures remaining here. Brann have got Lillestrøm at home next. Lillestrøm currently fighting for their absolute lives. Molde away, and then Viking at home, and Viking are one of their biggest rivals. So that's a tougher running than Bodø Glimt, who they've got Fredrikstad, a really good Fredrikstad, it must be said. This might be the game. This might be the only realistic game that they drop points in at home. Then they go to Odd away, which, I mean, nothing's set in stone, is it? That looks favourable. Odd might be down by then. And, final game at home to Lillestrøm. Lillestrøm might be down, or we might be in a position where we get an ABBA game, a winner takes it all. Win for the title and Lillestrøm win to stay up. I mean, that would be quite tasty, but as we come to it later, I think Lillestrøm will be down by then. So that might be quite an easy game. But yeah, it's exciting suddenly. It's got close, and fair play to Brann for getting back in this race.
It's time for you to put your neck on the line, Steve. In terms of the title race, this title, 3 games to go. Firstly, I want you to name me, from a fantasy point of view, those are playing Eliteserien fantasy. I've not checked my position in that league for quite some time, but I'm pretty sure I'll be near the bottom in the Nordic Football Podcast League. But we will talk about that a little bit. But if you were to name 3 players, Steve, on each side of Brann and Glimt that you think will be decisive for the title race, and then I would like you to name who you think is going to win the league with 3 games to go.
I think the 3
key players for each team. Obviously, Hegebo, as we mentioned, there's in form. Take it away.
Well, let's go with, I mean, Bodø Glimt, I'm going to go with Patrick Berg. I think he's in these crucial times, you sort of lean on experienced players and players that have done it before, sort of the heartbeat of the team. So I think Patrick Berg, he's a tough man. I would definitely lean on him if I had to. Also, Fredrik Andre Bjørkan. He's been there, he's done it, he's got the T-shirt, he's won things before. And, the third player, this might be a surprise for people. I'm going to go with the goalkeeper, Nikita Hayikin. I think he's been big for them this year at times. And they're giving up so many of these big chances.
Not like you to have a goalkeeper there, Steve.
Yeah. They're giving up so many big chances that I think he's at some point might have to come up big for them. So I would go with those 3: Patrick Berg, Fredrik Andre Bjørkan, and Nikita Hayikin. On the Brann side of things, Nicolas Castro, I think, has been brilliant recently. He's just, for many seasons, we've said, can he finally become this established Eliteserien player, top-class Eliteserien player, that is. And the second half of the season, he's delivered. I think there was glimpses of it in the first half. He's finally played a whole season of fitness, which is really big for him. So Castro, for me, is the number 1 player for Brann right now. Hegebo's come into his own, scored goals, in the second half of the season. He's kind of like maybe the hot hand. But so I'd go those 2. And I think the third player would have to be Emil Kornvig. He's, again, just come into form recently. And I like this stage of the season. I do like form players. Brann are more of a form team. The defence is playing quite well, of course, but there's been more injuries in their back line. and I think Brann are clicking probably a little bit better offensively. I think of the two teams, I'd say Nicolas Castro's the number one key player. He's really turned it around, and on his day he's pretty unplayable. And he's become, but for many years Magnus Wolff Eikrem was the best technician in this league. I think Nicolas Castro is knocking on that door now. So massive player.
Interesting there. And you've given your prediction?
I've got to go with Glimt to win the league. They've done it before, and I think at some stage, I was actually at half time in the Molde match. I was honestly thinking that this is it for Brann now. That it's going to be in their hands to win the league, and I just had a feeling that they would slip up somewhere and have some sort of meltdown. But it's not in their hands still. So does that help them? I just think the fixtures are always king. Fixtures are king, my friend. And they've got the tougher games. Simple as that. So that's why I've got to go with Bodø Glimt to win the title. But I am nervous for them. I don't like the panic that I'm seeing on the field. And this game against Fredrikstad is no gimme. Fredrikstad are in the Norwegian Cup final. And if they are fired up for this, Fredrikstad, then Glimt could be in for a tough game. But this might be the game. I'll say the title could be decided this weekend. On the face of it, they should be beating Lillestrøm and they should be beating Odd.
There you have it, the expert Meat Man Soccer. Tune in. It's going to be really cracking in the last 3 games. There's a lot at stake there. And I think the European distraction, as you've mentioned there, that could just be, maybe that works in Brann's favour. Who knows? And a massive club like Brann winning the title. Wow. There's a lot to play for in this final 3 games. Steve, whilst you were talking there, you might have just noticed I've just whipped on a shirt from Norway.
When I first saw this shirt, I thought it was the Coventry City away strip from when was it? In the late 80s, this beige sort of shirt. And then I realised it is a shirt from an Obos Ligaen team.
We have to talk about the final, just very briefly, of Obos, which ends this weekend. Steve, I thought we'll do that before we go on to the medals. And I know you've got a few things to say about some European games and a few other performances, Steve. But before we do, tomorrow, as in Saturday, Steve, it's the final day of the Obos season. And I don't know if you had a few things to say about that. Vålerenga are well clear. They're up. Brann as well. That's a massive achievement for them. They're going to be in the Eliteserien next season, Steve. And the reason I wanted to sort of have a little quick shout out is because I'm currently wearing a signed shirt from the entire Mjøndalen squad. So I do have to give a bit of a shout out here, Steve, at this point to Mjøndalen, because they're going into a massive game this weekend to stay up. They are second bottom of the league, 29 points. Levanger ahead of them in the relegation playoffs, and they play Raufoss away. Levanger have Asana at home, Steve. And pretty much one of those sides is going to go down automatically. Sandnes Ulf already gone as well. Just want to give a massive shout out to Kev Nicol and all the squad at Mjøndalen, who, of course, as you may remember from a few episodes back, I went to visit the club in May and had a good look around and was very well treated by the club, the players, and Kevin, of course, himself, the head coach. So I just want to give I personally, I've got the shirt on, Steve. I want to give a shout out, but do you have any comments on the final of the Obos? I know you do keep an eye on this league from time to time, but I just wanted to see, what your thoughts are about the league, the season in general, and maybe also a bit of a word for Brann and Vålerenga.
Yeah, I've not been focusing on it this year as much as normal. It was a busier summer with also, the Euro Championships on. That would normally be the time where I really get stuck in. But a bit sad actually with Mjøndalen. I'd be sad to see him go because, since we've done the NFP, there were periods where they were in Eliteserien and they were quite a good team to talk about. We had an interview with Vegard Hansen, we had an interview with Kevin Nicol, and they're a club that it'd be a shame once you go below the second tier, it can get a bit awkward in Norwegian football, and it's a big game for both. They are, you'd have to say they're the favourites to go at this point in time. Asan, they're relying on Asan basically to go to Levanger and put up a fight. A team with nothing to play for. And then Mjøndalen have obviously got to do their part as well and win the game at Raufoss. And Raufoss is still fighting for top 6 spots. So, Mjøndalen are actually odds against to win. So it's going to be tough, but you never know, do you? Funny things can happen in football. And then even if they did win, they've got to do the playoff. But congratulations to Vålerenga. I don't think it's anyone's surprise that they have won the league convincingly. I think if it had been maybe a tighter league or a more competitive league, they could have got a bit nervous. They did have a slow start to the season. Bryn, great to see them, of course. The founder club where Erling Haaland came through the ranks, and they're known for a decent youth academy through the years. Great to see them from the southwest region of Norway. We don't get that many teams do well. I mean, Viking, obviously the big club in that region. Sandnes, historically as well, but they're going down to the third tier, sadly, as well. Got a nice stadium, Sandnes, and recently made the Norwegian Cup semi-finals, but they're going down. So good to see Bryn do well. And then we got the playoff, of course. And I've always said, I think the team that finishes third bottom of Eliteserien probably will win the playoff. We've got Moss, Lynn, Egersund, Stabæk, probably Raufoss or Kongsvinger. The playoff system is so heavily weighted in favour of Eliteserien teams that it's so hard on the ones that finish third to sixth.
Yeah, I do have to say, I saw Moss live when I was in Norway, and I thought they looked pretty good. Decent squad. I don't know how they performed since. Obviously that was in May, so that a lot might have changed by then. They're third, but they look like a side that scores goals, Steve, 52 goals in their 29 games. And they look like a team who, they had a few decent players, I thought. It's an interesting quirk of this fixture list, Steve, because Mjøndalen actually played Raufoss last weekend and beat them 3-2. So I don't know what's going on with the fixture calendar there, but I had to double check that because I was a bit confused. Hey? But it's back-to-back games, home and away.
No, Moss have just beaten Raufoss.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you can delete that.
I think you get mixed up with your Fosses and your Rosses and your.
You can either delete that or just embarrass me. Mjøndalen, sorry, had a massive win against Stabæk. That was what I meant.
Yes. Yes.
Which kept them, which has kept them in the fight. Basically,
that was a shock win, by the way. That was a shock win.
They were down if they had lost that game.
Yeah.
More or less. So, yeah, massive good luck because their goal difference is 10 worse than Levanger, by the way. So they are really struggling. But yeah, my ability to read two teams that begin with the letter M aside, huge.
I've just seen Sandnes' goal difference. It's awful. -52.
Yeah, they've been dreadful because 77 conceded. They've been dreadful.
I'm cringing at that.
Yeah,
dear,
maybe they need Sean Constable in there. Who knows? He's doing well somewhere in that lower tier. They might be playing each other in a few years. Steve, let's move on. Massive. Just want to give, like I say, a big shout out to Kev Nicol and the whole Mjøndalen squad. I'm really rooting for you. I hope you guys get it done. And again, thank you for the hospitality during my stay, Steve. I'll be wearing this kit on the Saturday, I reckon, as well. I quite like this kit actually, by the way. It's actually a nice shirt. I think.
It's all right, isn't it?
It's not like the traditional football shirts. It's you can wear it with random other stuff. Quite like it. Anyway,
are you a collector of shirts? Do you collect a lot of shirts or not?
I do like collecting shirts, actually. I've got a lot of South American kits from places I've been. Got a Boca Juniors shirt, Steve, from when I went there a long time ago. I do like collecting kits. But this one is one where I probably wear it out, if you know what I mean, because it's not that... It's got a lot of sponsors on it. That's the only maybe downside in terms of aesthetically.
Yeah.
But... it's not like it's not too, a lot of football shirts are quite like they're either bright red, aren't they, or they're bright something. And
the green sponsor on there, what's that? KIM Kiwi, is it? What does it say? Kiwi something? I don't know.
Mini Mart, Mini Priest, Kiwi Mini Priest.
I quite like it.
Hey, you're not getting free sponsorship on this show. Yeah, we're not reading it out. All our marketing team. Let's move on, Steve. We've got a lot to go through. Medal race.
Yes.
Are talking about who's going to qualify for Europe next. You've been surprised by Brann. They're looking good for Europe. But Steve, there's a few teams. I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing Rosenborg in fifth. It's a bit of a mini revival, this, isn't it? And third place, we have Viking on 50 points, 5 points behind. They could still win the title, technically speaking. And even Molde could still win the title. They're only 7 points off it, but that would be some finish to the season if that was to happen. They're in fourth place. Where are you looking medal-wise, Steve, at this moment in time? I mean, I want to start by asking you a little bit about a Viking, actually, because they've kind of gone under the radar a little bit. And I'm curious to know what's been behind their sort of rise.
Just solid consistency. I mean, they should have got a medal last year, really. They have got... I mean, the last game of the season is against Brann. I mean, just say, for argument's sake, that it was a three-way battle going into the final game. It could happen. what they're hoping is that Brann drop points, and that maybe that last game would be at least on the line for second place. I would say for Viking, the difference is they've managed to get points in some critical situations. But like they came from 2-0 down to beat Sandefjord this weekend. That didn't always happen last season. I think they've been better in the key moments, if that makes sense, down the stretch compared to last year as well. And I think they'll be very disappointed not to get in the medal spots now after last year's, how they dropped down so quickly. I'm not actually sure whether the fourth place is guaranteed a spot now. Usually fourth place would get Europe depending on the winner of the Norwegian Cup. But I'm not sure because the Norwegian coefficient's been on the rise so much in recent times that there might be an extra spot. I'll have to clarify that. Getting the top three, you're definitely in some sort of European spot there.
Yeah, and in Viking's case, they've got the third top scorer in the league, Lars Jørgen Salvesen. Steve with 11 goals this season. He's doing quite well, 28-year-old, formerly of Glimt, of course, and Godset. And they've also got the top assist provider in the league, Zlatko Tripic, who bit of a fantasy legend, isn't he? 31, still plugging away, 9 goals, 12 assists this season.
The key man.
What a player he is in terms of that level. So, they've got, would you say, 2 of the best players in the league? Those 2?
Yeah, Tripic is absolute quality. And Salvesen, I think Salvesen's hit or miss. He's a big target man, number 9, who has a bit of technical skill. And on his day, he can be unplayable. But he's had injury problems, and that type of striker, if you can play them out the game a bit if you're smart, if you know what I mean.
That's that. I mean, do you have much to say about Mulder or Rosenborg at this moment in time?
I think Mulder are very disappointing. Their bare minimum objective was second place, really. They haven't been good enough. And I do wonder now, at the end of the season, again, the Norwegian Cup might save them. They're in the Norwegian Cup final against Fredrikstad. They'll be the favourites to win that. So, and that they've owned that competition in recent years, but they need to do more in the league now. I mean, it should be them. They should be there right on the heels of Bodø Glimt, waiting for them to slip up. It hasn't happened the last 2 or 3 years. Mulder have been underwhelming in the league in the last 2 seasons. I think that's fair to say now.
Yeah, and this evening as well, Conference League, Steve, 3-0 defeat at Jagiellonia Bielefeld. Funnily enough, one of the goal scorers in that game was Hansen, who is a Norwegian, Christopher Hansen. He bagged 2 goals, Steve, for the Polish side. He is formerly of Sandefjord and Sarpsborg. Any comment on that European match and sort of where they sit in that table? I mean, I don't have all night to look at the Conference League table, but I can see that Bielefeld are third. Chelsea, of course, had an 8-0 win tonight, which it just feels ridiculous. Chelsea playing against Noah. I mean, what is that competition all about, really? A team that spent billions against a team that's named after an ark. Literally, I think that is actually literally the reason that they're called Noah. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well,
but it leaves Mulder in 22nd. It leaves Mulder in 22nd place, Steve, and maybe follows that trend that you're saying about them not really performing this year.
I think there was always going to be a flood of goals expected in that Chelsea game, wasn't there? I get my coat. But listen, the Jagiellonia game, I don't even know how you pronounce them, by the way. So anyone from that region of Poland, I've butchered that name. They absolutely battered them. The place was rocking. And Mulder, that was really disappointing for that. I don't really know why they were so bad. Maybe the Polish side are better than I give them credit for. But yeah, that's disappointing. They still have 3 points on the board, and they've got matches against Apoel, who just beat Fiorentina, by the way, tonight. So that might not be a gimme. HJK Helsinki, that's a sort of Royal League, back to the Royal League days there. And then a team called Mlada Boleslav. Are they Czech? I think. I mean, Mulder should probably still qualify for the next round of conference games, but I don't know. There's something underwhelming about that team at times in the last couple of years. They've had great performances as well mixed in, but too inconsistent. I think, was there an episode I said they need to change their formation and tactics? And I think they do need to change it. I really think they need to look going back to a flat back 4 next season. And for the first time, I do wonder, do they need to change a manager? Let's not go there yet, because I do like Erling Moe. I'm a big Moe fan. But I just something I sense that's, it's not because he's a bad manager or anything. Just sometimes a change is what you need at a club, Just wondering.
I'm trying to think of who that actress is. A change would do you good. Is it Janis Joplin? I don't even know. But moo problems maybe over at Mulder. But they do, in fairness to them, despite your critique, they do have the 2 top goal scorers in the league, Stephen Christian Eriksen and Magnus Wolf Eichholm, 25 goals between them. So at least they have some goals to build on in future seasons, maybe, or games between now and the end of the season. Steve, you've written down here, so I'm just going to read it out because there's no point beating around the bush on the agenda for this meeting. Lillestrøm and Odd look down. That is the title of the next section. I mean, take it away. Both of them are bottom 2 of the league. There's 3 games to go, Steve. There's only a 3-point gap to Haugesund in 14th. But who am I to argue with the artillery title? Lillestrøm and Odd look down.
Odd on 23 points. Lillestrøm on 24 points. Haugesund on 27 points in the playoff spot. And Sandefjord on 28 points, nearest safe position.
We can't be losing Odd.
Well, I think actually Odd have got a better chance of surviving than Lillestrøm right now. And I'll tell you why, even though they've got less points. Lillestrøm, I've got a massive problem with Lillestrøm. I really have, because their goal difference is really bad. -23. They're 7 worse than Haugesund, right? They're 3 points behind Haugesund. So the bare minimum, they've got to get 4 points to get above Haugesund, unless Haugesund get battered 3 times. Could happen. Okay, so Lillestrøm's remaining games, they've got to go away to Brann and Bodø Glimt, who are both going for the title. I mean, their other game is Sandefjord at home. I suppose we've got to give them that win, haven't we? Maybe. But but do they win that? Because they just lost, potentially, the game that relegates them. They just lost at home to Haugesund 1-0. Now, when the chips are down, when the survival's on the line, to lose at home to Haugesund, come on, man, that's not good enough. And I think that's the end of Lillestrøm. They're going to have to produce something special now. They're going to have to defy the odds, because do you honestly see them getting a point, either Brann or Glimt? I can't see it. In which case they're down. So
what's been the tale of their demise? Because this is a dramatic fall, isn't it? I mean, Odd, I didn't expect to go down. I don't think you had them in your preseason predictions to be down, but Lillestrøm,
yeah,
what is the tale of this decline, Steve?
It's a carbon copy of Vålerenga last year. I mean, what is it about these 2 teams? They seem to follow each other's paths, and I just like what I can't even put my finger on it. I mean, Andreas Georgsen, that probably didn't help that he left the club. Not that they were doing amazingly when he left, but at least he left them in a decent enough position compared to where they are now. An horrendous mid-season slump. The home form's dried up. They're normally really good at Åråsen Stadium. The fans can sort of get them over the line in games. And I thought that was going to happen. They beat Odd 3-0. And I thought they'll back that up with a win against Haugesund. And if they'd actually won that game, that's how pivotal that loss is. They probably would have been in a more favourable spot to survive. It hasn't happened for Lillestrøm. I think it's not just one thing; it's a collection of things, as there often is. The squad quality, I think, definitely shouldn't be bad enough to be down there. But I did say in the season preview show, the competitive level of the Eliteserien is so good now. All it takes is one of these mid-table clubs, or even an upper mid-table club, to have one poor year, get dragged down there, and they're under pressure, and they could go down. So it's not a shock in terms of what I foresaw that way.
Do you know an interesting thing about Lillestrøm, Steve? I mean, looking at the metrics with our partners, Wyscout, just want to give a big shout out to Wyscout. Don't forget to follow them. We will have another Wyscout blog coming soon, giving our analysis for our partners there. Just looking at some of their metrics, Steve, on Wyscout, and Lillestrøm, curiously enough, Steve, they're literally bang in the middle of the table for both expected goals and expected goals against, 8th. And yet they're down there, like you say, at the bottom. That implies to me that it's kind of like they're losing control of games at certain moments, or it's like, they're not doing certain things. Do you know what I mean? Things are not going their way. The other interesting thing to note, I think, Steve, about Lillestrøm, statistically, according to our partners Wyss, they have the oldest average age in Eliteserien at 28.1. The youngest, by the way, is Rosenborg at 23.1. So that tells you a little bit about this is potentially an aging squad, isn't it? And I think I'm right in saying, Steve, they have the former Varnum manager, who we have had on this podcast.
Well, no, I'll tell you who's there now.
He was there.
Fadugba's there now, the former Vålerenga boss.
They've gone through a few managers, haven't they? Because they did have.
Oh yeah, they've had a lot of managers in the last 2 years. A lot, too many, really. That could be an issue. Like, not just looking this season, the previous season. Geir Bakker leaving the club. It's a collection of things, really, with Lillestrøm. And then I've got to mention Odd. This might be the last we mention of them on the NFP when they go down. I've worried about them for years. I just simply don't think they're good enough. They've messed up in a few transfer windows. They still got a better chance, though. I mean, they have a home match against Bodø Glimt. That's probably a loss, but they go to Sandefjord. That's winnable. That's a massive game now. And then they go to Haugesund on the last game. So if they can get themselves within touching distance of Haugesund before that last game, they've got a chance. They've got a chip in a chair, if you know what I mean. But I think I'm kind of worried for them. I mean, Sandefjord are looking at this game as a must-win for them as well, by the way. So, I mean, I expect Sandefjord to beat them, but it's a winnable game.
Yeah, or do have that sort of air of maybe a Obos Ligaen club, don't they? Recently, they haven't pulled up too many trees. I mean, we don't talk about them a huge amount in recent years on this pod. They had a few good years early in our stint, but things don't seem to be looking good there, Steve. 5 wins out of 27 games. Before we move on, there were about 6 teams, I would say, above these bottom 2, Lillestrøm and Odd, who mathematically, I mean, there's more than 6, but I would say realistically, maybe you could include K from Oslo in 7th. But below that, Steve, you've got HamKam, Strømsgodset, Sarpsborg, Kristiansand, Tromsø, Sandefjord, Haugesund, all within a sort of 7-8 point radius of each other with 3 games left. Is there any team that you can see getting sucked into potential relegation playoff trouble? With Haugesund obviously only 1 point behind Sandefjord. Or if you had to sort of name 1 or 2 teams that you're going to keep your eye on in these next 3 games that you think could get sucked in, who would they be, if anyone?
Yeah, I mean, it's all dependent on Haugesund, isn't it, really? And, just say Sandefjord did beat Odd, though, as well. And Haugesund, you never know with them. That's a massive win for them to beat Lillestrøm away. Tromsø have kind of been treading water. These teams do have a better goal difference above them, by the way. So they've got that in their pocket. Not massive difference, but it's enough. Look, I think all of them could get nervous. It's as simple as that, really. If Haugesund start winning games, my gosh, I mean, you might need 30, 32, 33 to avoid the playoff. But would you really fear the playoff? Honestly, I just think the playoff is so geared strongly towards the Eliteserien team. The teams in Obos have got to go through each other first, and then it's a 2-legged game. And usually the Eliteserien side dominates the contest. Occasionally you've had stuff like Jørv beat Brann on penalties, and I think Mjøndalen did that a few years ago as well. But I wouldn't really fear the playoff. You don't want to be in it. Of course you don't want to be in it. But I'd be working along the grounds of if we're in that playoff, we're all right. So they're just looking at them bottom 2. Direct relegation seems out of the question now. Well, it's not completely. But if I was to worry about a team, it would probably be Tromsø, because they've just treaded water so much in recent weeks, and I think they might feel like they should have beaten HamKam last time out. That 94th minute equaliser from HamKam, and that can play on your mind if you can see late goals in times like this. They in my head they're thinking we should be 32 points and safe, so they would be the team. But it's got to be Sandefjord for me or Haugesund in the playoff spot.
Not afraid of that trapdoor then, the relegation trapdoor. Good luck as well to a friend of the pod, Tom Dent. They're playing Rosenborg this weekend at HamKam. Should be a big game. And as you mentioned there with Tromsø, Steve, Haugesund Tromsø looks to be one of the games of the weekend, really, from that point of view, because as you mentioned in terms of the relegation, and Brann Lillestrøm, that's a big one, isn't it, tomorrow? European performances, we've sort of touched on them a little bit. Don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say about some of those teams, but did want to ask about the Norwegian Cup final, Steve, before we move on to part 2 with a brief preview of the end of the season in Sweden. Who have we got in the Norwegian Cup final, firstly?
Molde again. And I need to look back at the record in the last 5 years for this, but I think they probably won about 4 Norwegian Cups. Fredrikstad against Molde. That is the final in Oslo on the 7th of December. It's going to be the last domestic match of the season. And what a great achievement for Fredrikstad. Back promoted side, lost their manager mid-season to AEK in Sweden. And it looks like they're going to fall short in terms of a medal spot or top 4 spot. But they could still win the Norwegian Cup final, but they've got to beat Molde. And the last time the two teams met, Molde beat them 6-1 on the 14th of September. So that's the one really bad result Fredrikstad have had all season. But it kind of reminds me a little bit when Brann got relegated, came back up, and they won the Norwegian Cup. So could Fredrikstad kind of do the same? And there will be pressure on Molde because it looks like that might be the match that saves their season. But I do want to give credit to Fredrikstad for a strong campaign. They've really surpassed expectations at a club where expectations are often naturally quite high anyway. And it historically was a circus. And I suppose we should congratulate Molde on making another final appearance as well. My hat will be firmly in the neutral camp. May the best team win. But I'm sure there'll be a lot of Fredrikstad fans that day.
Yeah, they've had a remarkable rise, haven't they? And it's fitting to get to a cup final. And from Molde's point of view, Steve, I've done the digging for you. They have won 2 of the last 3 Norwegian Cups. Obviously, 2020 was cancelled, the final, and in 2019, Viking won it. So big game for them. And if they were to win, they would go joint with Brann as the joint 6th most successful side in Norwegian Cup history, with 7 cup wins in their history. So let's see if Molde can do it, or can Fredrikstad. Steve, they've been in a few finals over the years. I mean, going back to the 1950s, 1960s, even looking at the records, they've been in a lot. They've been runners up a lot of times, actually. Steve, ever the bridesmaids. Won it in 1984, probably around the time, I don't know, you were maybe born, I don't know, but yeah, and also they won it in 2006. So I don't think you were born around then. Because
I presume, I've not looked, but I presume the match will be played at the Ullevål Stadion in Oslo, and it's usually on grass. And Molde have got a really good record, I say, in those finals against Glimt. They seem to like playing on this pitch, but it is in December, so maybe they could have switched it to Vålerenga's ground. I need to look. I'm pretty sure
it's at the Ullevål in Oslo.
Ullevål,
7th of December. So the season will be done by then. But yeah,
that'll be a low-scoring game. There won't be many goals in that game you watch. That'll be a tight match. If I'm betting on the game, I'll be betting on the unders. Fredrikstad, good defensive side, apart from when they got beat 6-1 by Molde. That'll probably make them even more defensive, won't it, here? And if they can keep it tight this time, they've got a chance.
Absolutely, and that'll do it for part 1. We're going to just very briefly talk about Sweden in part 2 and just look at the last weekend of the season in Allsvenskan, which takes place this weekend. We do have a very special guest episode coming up for you in Sweden, so stay tuned for that one. But we'll make those announcements when we can. In the meantime, we'll join us after a short break for a very short part 2.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. You're with Steve Wyss and Jonathan Fadugba, and we have reached the final fence in the Swedish Allsvenskan for 2024. Yeah, the final round number 30 is upon us, and the matches will be played this Sunday, all kicking off at the same time, of course. There's something about that in leagues. I love it, Jonathan, when everyone's playing at the same time. It doesn't happen enough. It used to happen Boxing Day here. Back in the day, I wish it still happened. And we've got to look what's on the line for teams. And the title's won, but the medal spots are still up for grabs. There's a relegation battle still to be fought over. So, I mean, where do we start, Jonathan? I suppose we've got to start by congratulating Malmö. They have won the title. I think the first time we're recording now since they have won the title. And down at the bottom, commiserations to Västerås, who are relegated, and Kalmar are all but down. Well, they are, unless they turn around an incredible goal difference. So, yeah, top of the table, Malmo, well done to them.
Yeah, and we will talk about Malmo in a future episode. I think we do have some content coming up for Malmo fans around Wyscout potentially, so keep an eye out for that. We will have a proper episode about Sweden in the next week or so. As I mentioned before the break, we have maybe a potential guest episode coming as well. So a lot to talk about, but this will keep it brief for now. Malmo, of course, have won the title, well deserved. They saw it off, Steve, when they beat IFK Göteborg 2-1. At the end of October, of course, Taha Ali and Hugo Bolin turned around the sort of 1-0 deficit to IFK, the big rivals, of course, and that was a great way to sort of cap off the title. Followed up last weekend, Steve, with a 2-2 draw at Hammarby, who potentially maybe that could be next season's title race between the two of them. So yeah, a massive praise for Malmo. They've lost in Europe this week, but in terms of the Swedish league, they are the kings again. And I think, we'll talk a little bit more about what's happened. It's been a different season for Malmo. I think it's not a huge amount of dominance as maybe in previous years, although the table does suggest that. But they've been sort of up and down, I think. On their day, they've been electric. At times, they've been a little bit high off the ball. But all in all, Steve, I think especially the youth of their squad, the depth of their squad, and just the ability of their manager has seen them over the line. And also maybe a bit of a lack of challenges. You look at the second place, third place, fourth place, Steve. 7 defeats out of 29, 10 defeats out of 29, and 9 defeats out of 29. You can't win a title losing 33% of your matches. So that also gives Malmo, who have only lost 3 games all season, a major edge. If you don't lose games, good chances is you're going to win or at least compete for titles. So, yeah, massive congratulations to them. We will talk more about them, maybe a bit more stylistically and tactically, and about the players. But for now, yeah, congratulations to Malmo.
Can you name off the top of your head the 3 teams that beat Malmo this season? I can definitely name one off the top of my head, but I just wondered if you could remember who actually beat them. I'll leave that quiz question with you before the end of the episode.
To be asking me that when we've not really.
Steve's quiz. Hammarby
Mjällby will be one.
Mjällby are definitely one. Yeah, I don't know about the other 2. I can't remember the other 2 losses. So
I think Guys, but I could be wrong. I'm thinking Guys,
but that's a good question. We'll reveal at the end of the episode. Hammarby are locked up in second because of their goal difference. Well done to them. AIK had a chance to secure third place and challenge for second, but they lost to Norrköping 1-0, a result which Norrköping has confirmed their survival. I have to say, Norrköping defended like beavers. If they'd defended like that all season, they would have had no problems whatsoever surviving this year. As an epic defensive stand. But third place is up for grabs. AIK against Djurgården. So we've got AIK against Halmstad and Djurgården against a now safe Norrköping. Halmstad are still not officially safe from relegation. So that's on paper a tougher fixture. AIK have got to win. They've got to win that game to confirm third place. So that is the first match. It's going to impact top and bottom of the table, Jonathan, because down at the bottom, Värnamo 30 points in the playoff. IFK Göteborg, again, goes to the final game of the season. I can't believe this. How does this keep happening? 31. And Halmstad 33, but they do have a minus 14 goal difference. So the fixtures, the important ones, Mjällby against IFK Göteborg and Värnamo against Elfsborg. And, of course, AIK against Halmstad there, affecting top and bottom of the table. I mean, how do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, predictions-wise, I think it's tough to call. It's looking like Kalmar are down, unfortunately. There's been a big fallout this week. There's been a lot of question marks about the management there and the sort of the chief executives and people like that, the higher ups. I think there's going to be a lot of things to discuss, Steve. They're going to be going down for the first time in many a year. Kalmar, such a sort of fun team to cover on this pod, isn't it, over the years? Many Kalmar fans who listen to this show. So we'll have a little bit of a breakdown about them in the next sort of Swedish-focused episode. But yeah, in terms of the final day, we've got Halmstad, like you mentioned there. Norrköping have just about managed to secure their safety, which is huge, really. And Värnamo, Steve, the team that you maybe didn't quite mention in terms of their game, they've got a game against Elfsborg. Now, there's a little bit of needle here. If you've been following on social media, there's a little bit of skullduggery going on, Steve, a little bit of mischief A little bit of
Who's at the forefront of this?
Underhand scheming going on, because there's a theory, and of course Elfsborg have been in European action tonight. Managed to get a creditable draw. Elfsborg are doing well in Europe, by the way. They've been really fun to watch. Got a 1-1 draw against Braga. That game was actually quite difficult to watch because of all the smoke. I don't know if you watched the match, but they got on with the game anyway, and they managed to get out a 1-1 draw against a good, decent Portuguese side. But Steve, the skullduggery here is that Elfsborg fans have been discussing the table and the humour if they were to sort of just accidentally lose this game, and it was to therefore drop their rivals IFK Göteborg into the relegation playoff, because they obviously fairly local rivals. Boras and Gothenburg are not too far away from each other. Elfsborg are not really massive fans of IFK, so there is a few people saying, listen, if we lost, I wouldn't be too fussed amongst the Elfsborg contingent, because that would drop IFK into it as long as Halmstad, if IFK lose, their last game is, of course, they are playing Mjällby away. If they lose that game and Värnamo win, then, or even maybe draw, because it would depend on obviously the goal difference. The goal difference is very tight, -9 IFK, Värnamo -10, so there's only one goal in it. As long as Halmstad, of course, don't get sucked into it as well, that would drop IFK into the playoffs. And when you look at the playoffs, Steve, currently in Superettan, there's the off chance that it could be Helsingborg in that relegation playoff. And now I know you said the trapdoor, it's an easy game, but I don't think IFK would want to be playing Helsingborg in that relegation playoff. That would be very tasty indeed. I think they'd still probably win it if they were to fall into it, but from a fan point of view, Helsingborg will be well up for that, because they consider themselves a big club. So from that point of view, it would be. But at this moment in time, it's Landskrona Boys who are the team that it looks set to be involved. So we can't really comment at this moment in time. And Landskrona aren't that far away, I don't believe, from Gothenburg. But yeah, Halmstad, they might be able to pull something off against AIK away. They've been in good form. They beat Djurgården last weekend, Steve. They've turned things around a little bit, and they've managed to give themselves a chance. I thought they were gone at one point. They really looked in massive trouble. But Yannick Agnero up front has been looking pretty tasty. He scored to get the winner against Djurgården, and he's come in and sort of done quite well. They've rotated the team around a little bit, and that's given them a chance. Djurgården are kind of a bit of a mess right now. And Steve, we've got to also give a shout out to Mjällby, because if they were to beat IFK this weekend, I'm pretty sure, depending on obviously the Djurgården result, but that would secure their highest ever league finish, I think. So Mjällby under obviously Anders Torstensson, who, earlier in the season we talked. Well, I don't think we actually talked about it on the show, but had a terrible sort of diagnosis with his health. It would be a massive achievement if him and his squad could pull off a top 4 finish, which is possible if Djurgården lose.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest banker of the week, surely Värnamo. Värnamo are going to be Elfsborg. They just are. Forget about conspiracy theorists. It's just sheer motivation. Elfsborg coming on the back of a grueling game against Braga there. Was it smoke, you said? I thought it was fog. I had it on and I thought it was just fog, but
it could be, yeah. I mean, with Sweden, you never know. I never know.
I didn't know what it was. I could hardly see the game. But that was a good result. I mean, I think Värnamo are playing fairly well anyway, reasonably well. I think they'll win that. I mean, the big question mark game, Halmstad, shout out to them, by the way. They have defended unbelievably well the last 2 games. No one was getting past them. Häcken, and back-to-back clean sheets against Häcken and Djurgården. And that's amazing stuff. And there's no gimme for AIK. I could still see renaissance and hope for Djurgården here. They could still sneak into the medals because Halmstad might do them a favour here. So the big question mark is IFK. IFK may well be in a position where they've got to win the game to avoid the playoff. And they've done that before by a whisker. They've got to go to Mjällby, a tough place to go and get a result. Can they do it? And I think that's going to be the pivotal game, really. Otherwise, if Värnamo and IFK win, then we're looking at Halmstad potentially. If they lost, then their goal difference is a problem. But it's all on that IFK Göteborg game for me at Mjällby, Jonathan. Would you agree?
The EFK game is massive. EFK have taken the decision this week to have training behind closed doors. No media, no fans. So although I think they've got media allowed after the session, but they've decided to have private training sessions, which in Sweden is, sometimes you can go and watch training and that kind of thing. They've decided to go in-house. Big, massive game for their management there, Steve. I know you've had some comments about their managers in the past and that kind of thing. But at this moment in time, the away end is, I think, sold out. Mjällby is a tough place to go. I think that it's a really tough game for them. I think Mjällby are going to fancy their chances. The only thing with Mjällby is sometimes I do feel like in some big games they take their after ball at times. They don't have a huge amount to play for here, but Mjällby they're not hugely reliant unless it's Malmo. They seem to turn up for every single time they play them. They can sometimes disappoint in these games where you think they're going to get something. So I do think EFK can get a result. It's not like a game they can't win. I could see it either going one of two ways. I think they could either get a comfortable win, or I think Mjällby are going to give them a real proper battle. And in that case, they might be struggling, maybe looking at a point. It's very hard to predict EFK these days. Goals have gone down a little bit, but they're looking slightly more solid. So defensively, maybe can they keep tight and maybe just kind of nick something? Or will they go more attacking? Billborn likes to attack at times. And that's what Mjällby, they've been really good this season. You got to praise them. Results have tailed off a little bit, 2 draws in their last 2 games, but they are unbeaten, Steve, since September when they lost to Malmo. So massive game in my opinion. But one thing we know about Torstensen and the backroom staff there, they'll be well up for it. I mean, they will fancy their chances. So yeah, take your pick. It's going to be an interesting final day, Stephen. I do tend to agree with you. Varnamo are going to be pumped up for that one. They have looked a little bit better in recent weeks, as has Halmstad. All the teams have upped their game, even Norrköping of late. So that's what's kind of dropped the EFK back into it, because at one point they looked fine, and now all the teams have sort of just upped their game in the last few weeks. So yeah, huge match.
Of course, the match which looks like it's relegated Kalmar and has really put EFK back in the mire was the 1-1 draw the last weekend, where I don't really know how EFK didn't win it. They led at half time and they had 2 or 3 massive chances to basically get the job done. And if they'd won that game, they wouldn't be safe, but they would have put a hell of a lot of pressure on Halmstad the next day, and they would be now in a position where, and Varnamo for that matter, the next day, they'd be in a position where a draw would be enough to keep them up. So that's potentially 2 massively dropped points for EFK and for Kalmar as well. It was a must-win game, which they didn't get the win out of. Looking back, it was a tough scheduling spot for both, actually. I feel if that match had been played on the Monday, I think someone would have won it because they just had to win it. Yeah, that was a big. So predictions then. We've got to give a prediction from JF. Who is going to finish 3rd and who is going to finish 14th?
Third, I am going to say third is an interesting one. Obviously, with the AIK match, Djurgården have played in Europe. They've beaten Panathinaikos. Steve,
that's a hell of a win, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, that is a big win. Gullikson and Hummit on the score sheet there against the Greeks, and that is a pretty decent result. But you've got to factor in maybe it's a little bit of tiredness there. They're going to TNS, Steve, in a few weeks' time. That's going to be a crazy trip for them to Wales.
Is that Shrewsbury? They play at Shrewsbury, don't they?
Yeah, well, I don't know where they play. Yeah, I think they maybe do, but for European games.
Shall we go to Shrewsbury and watch them?
Hey, listen, if they're putting on media tickets, I'll be up for it. They don't have a manager currently. They've still got an interim, but yeah, they've got Norrköping. I think third. I'm going to say AIK will clinch 3rd, and relegation playoff. I'm going to say Varnamo, Steve. I think Elfsborg are quite strong. Even with no motivation, I think Elfsborg will get a point, and I think EFK will get a point minimum. So I think it will be Varnamo in that playoff. I just can't see EFK allowing themselves to slip into that playoff zone.
So EFK win the game if they need to win the game. You think
it's too big a game for them to not win, in my opinion.
A draw. To be fair, a draw is useless for EFK. It's pointless. A draw doesn't help them in any way. So it's win or bust, isn't it? Basically. So
well, if they draw, I mean, obviously, Varnamo still have to get a result. They have to win because otherwise they'd be 2 points ahead. So if Arnhem draw, IFK draw, they're
yeah,
fine.
you are right. Actually, if IFK, yeah, you're right. If they lost and Varnamo drew, the goal difference could come into play. Actually, you are right.
But your point is generally, yeah, they can't just go there and approach it with like getting a draw, because if Varnamo win, then they're screwed.
Yeah.
So yeah,
they are.
In terms of Kalmar as well, just quickly, gutted to see them go. The chairman's resigned, by the way, in the last few days. So there's a lot going on there, which we will talk about next week. I do want to hear from Kalmar fans. What do you put this season down to? Because I can't believe they're getting relegated, Steve. They're like a fixture of this.
It's the first time since 2002 since they were lost in Super 8, I do believe. They've obviously been a massive part of whilst we've been doing NFP. We've had a lot of interactions with Kalmar fans, and an interesting club. At times, a very, very interesting club. So it's sad to see them go, really. But I never saw it coming this season. Did you?
No, I mean, we will talk about them in a coming pod, but I didn't see them going down. I thought they would get out of it until the last few weeks, especially with the form that they picked up. But it just shows you, Steve, if you take your eye off the ball, even for one season in this league, it's not, you can get sucked in, as IFK potentially finding out. So
finish with, Jonathan, on the show, where we, on a recent episode, we discussed the Stockholm syndrome, the goings on after the Derby game, Hammarby, Djurgården, and we had a rather interesting email from one of the followers of the show, and from Yigit Kavasoglu, a huge fan of the Nordic Football Podcast, he said in the email, and he said some very interesting things in this email, Jonathan, which I know caught your eye, about fan behaviour over in Turkey and suggestions about how to actually solve it. He basically says, don't go down the route of not having any away fans allowed because it spoils it. But he was also saying that he believes that abandoning the match and giving the other team a 3-0 win is right. But I just wanted to say a massive thanks to Yigit for this email. It was a very well-constructed email. Some great thoughts on there, and it was fantastic to get such a measured response from someone. Would you not agree?
Yeah, it was really good to hear from this email. It was fantastic, actually. You forwarded it to me, and I had a good read of it, and it's great to get feedback. And I kind of agreed with a lot of what was said in the email in terms of what should be done. He does mention about what we discussed, Steve, in terms of fans could like try and sabotage other clubs. We did have that conversation, didn't we, as well? And I don't know. I think it's an interesting one. It's an interesting debate, and obviously from Turkey, that's a league where you do get a bit of naughtiness. Yeah. He called it humble thoughts regarding the last episode, and he said, "Lastly, I would also like to say that you guys are doing a great job in making people love football in Scandinavia, and it's very valuable to create this kind of niche product like Nordic Football Podcast. I hope we can meet one day and get to know each other in person. It'll be great to chat with you guys about scouting and the future of the game." So we've got to give a massive shout out to Yigit Khan Kavusoglu. Hopefully pronounced that correctly. Looks like he's based in Istanbul. The Turkish league, Steve. I know that obviously Jose Mourinho had a few things to say, didn't he, this week about the the big game there. And it is a we talked about France, didn't we, as well, and the problems in France with away fans. I think we are heading that way. I mean, there's still a lot of repercussions to come, I think, in Sweden around that. But no, he wrote a really well-structured, really good email. You can email us, nordicfootballpod@gmail.com, if you ever sort of have comments and you want to give us a bit of an insight or a shout-out. And it's like you say, even though we've been away, Steve, at the points this season for various reasons, it's good to know that there's still a bit of love out there for us.
That was a lovely way to finish the email, I must say. It was one of those sort of make you feel good comments. And do you know what? If we ever do meet, there's a beer for you get on me as well. The tight Yorkshire.
I wouldn't mind like a Turkish sort of. It's made me a bit hungry actually thinking about going out to Turkey and just having some food.
What is a good beer in Turkey? Like I've never been, so
I've never been
know
either.
what the beers are out there.
I've never been, but I've heard it's really nice. So
yeah.
Listen, I don't need. I do need a holiday actually, Steve. So, but no, it was a fantastic email, and as I say, it's good to know that we still got a few fans out there, eh, Mr. Wyss?
Yeah. The just going to Turkey, I remember there was a game. I can't remember when this was. Probably at least 10 years ago, where Fenerbahce there was a ban put on their male supporters, so they filled the whole ground with women and kids.
I remember that.
It's like 55, 60,000 women and kids, and they made a right racket. I can't remember how on earth that transpired, but that's Turkish football in a nutshell for you, isn't it? An absolute mad place where we don't often go, do we? So.
No, I do, and also do follow us on Twitter. Just to finish off, at Nordic Foot Pod, or X as they call it now, and also YouTube. We had a few. We sometimes get comments on YouTube, don't we, Steve?
Yes. Yes.
But 1 or 2 bits of feedback on there as well. So yeah, we still have a few things up our sleeve. There's going to be European games throughout December, Steve. It's looking like we're not getting our winter break this year. Man United is going to be a big one, and of course, as I mentioned, if once we get word of this mystery guest, we shall be in touch and let the listeners know.
Yes, we look forward to that. Good episode as always, Jonathan. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening. You take care out there, and we will see you next time on the Nordic Football Podcast. So see y'all.
Good luck, Mjällby.